Yes, the younger fairy one. Brilliant is obsessed with accents. So I made them these snuggies, but the police really like gets her hair all like bobbed up. And so he was like, could you just replace it with like towel back, whatever. I was like, yeah, sure. But then I went to Japan and I found these like a perfect yeah, a funny one. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Burning marshmallows.
Yeah, because I'm going to the so I'm going to but George is really waiting. Yeah, so like George is waiting.
The marshmallows?
I've asked the
I've never had so marshmallows.
Oh, good. So it's better than what he was. Let me get the best guy.
Creme brulee marshmallow here, and then you make that into oh, but yeah, don't touch it right when it comes off the fire. It's very hot. Melt your finger off.
Well, microphone. So do microphone.
You made it.
François, check this. So then are you taking the pictures? Dan, are you taking the pictures?
I could.
Please. Because we have to. I need to check this stuff.
They may have done.
Let's start. So I don't know. Just somewhere. Sorry, I continue. Is it live? Not yet?
Yep, it is live.
It's live. How many people online can you see? You don't see?
They said just double check your mic.
Yeah, that's 1, 2, 3. Sounds like this one. One minute to go.
Everybody's quiet.
Yeah, exactly. So as I say, like all of a sudden, like.
They look to the tiger and say, oh, wow. Well, I should talk with him. And get enough. Just an average. No, man, not even talking average. Yeah. It becomes a religious thing.
The 601 and we'll go. Okay, let's start. Well, hello everyone and welcome to a 2026 Herbert and Parker Spring Lecture. My name is Sergei Tolmachov. I'm member of Board of Trustees of Herbert and Parker Foundation, and I'm Director of United States Trans-Uranium and Uranium Registry. It is my pleasure to introduce today Dr. François Paquet. So he's expert in radiological protection and internal dosimetry with more than 30 years of experience in radiation science. He currently serves as a Deputy Director for research and expertise in the environment at the French Nuclear Safety and Radiation Protection Authority, where he oversees research on the effects of ionizing radiation to the humans and biota, as the environment. He is also in course of more than 180 peer-reviewed papers, scientific books, and book chapters. So Dr. Paquet began his scientific career with a training in marine biology and later complete his PhD focused on the biokinetics of americium in marine organisms. So actually, 1997, he spent 1 year at the Loveless Respiratory Research Institute in New Mexico. So where he conducted experiments and research on decorporation of actinides and speciation of actinides in the primates. So François Paquet is a well-recognized international expert. So he serves as a vice chair of ICRP Committee 2, and he's the chair of ICRP Task Group 95, which is on internal dosimetry. Right? Yeah. So this evening the lecture title is "Can we really calculate the risk?" This is a presentation has been live streamed, so we have people online, and it will be recorded and available at WC YouTube channel, so everybody can watch it. So with this, François, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much. Is it better now? Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. So thank you for your very kind introduction. I should say that it is really a pleasure for me to be there. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor really to be there because I was younger. I was just looking to the publication from USTOR. It was amazing for us because I was doing experiment on mice and rodents, and for us, human data were just a gold standard. So it was really important for us, and I am so happy to be there. It's very, very nice. But before to start, I have to say something very important. I'm French, and I'm very sorry, but I'm French. You know, this French is this guy with this very strange accent that nobody understands. But I will do my best to discuss with you. And you know, the French are those people who really like to talk a lot, to have never-ending discussion. And we even have discussion when we already have taken the decision. We have the discussion after. And this is this guy with who are usually in bad mood. But don't worry, today I'm very good mood, especially because you are there, because it's a great honor for me to be there with you and to discuss it together. So I'm hoping that we'll try to have a great time all together. So because I'm French, I came in my luggage with some souvenir of France that won't be long, but everybody knows Paris and the Eiffel Tower, this beautiful city. You know the French food with the cheese, with the snails, with the frogs, everything which is good to taste. You know the luxury, you know the fashion with this. You know many things. I'm going too fast. You know what? I will take the arrow. What you maybe do not know yet is that in France we also housed several scientific bodies, such as the CNRS. CNRS is the National Center for Research. We have Institut Pasteur, as long as biology is concerned. Institut Pasteur is an institute which is leading institute in terms of producing vaccine. We have still in biology INSERM, which make research for medical staff, and they all play a key role in biology and medicine. Of course, we have many other actors in physics, mathematics, and so on. And because we are talking here today about nuclear energy, you maybe know that in France we have about 65% of electricity which comes from the nuclear energy. So to do that, we have many actors. We have the Atomic Energy Commission, which make research. We have EDF, which produce the electricity. We have Orano for the uranium cycle. And we have the ANDRA for the waste. and we have the French authority for nuclear safety and radiation protection authority, and this is where I work. So my office in Paris, I've got a second office in Cadarache. Cadarache is close to Marseille. So this is not Cadarache, but this is a picture from Marseille, so you can enjoy it. And actually, because Cadarache is about 500 miles far from Paris, this is my third office, where I spend most of my time. And because I'm lucky enough to be ICRP member, I've got also a fourth office. And ICRP, I guess everybody of you know ICRP, is the International Commission on Radiological Protection. This is an independent commission that provides recommendation on the guidance on all aspects of protection against ionizing radiation. So ICRP is not the only actor in all these schemes. ICRP provides recommendation. You can. Do I have a laser? Yeah. I should not do that. So ICRP is one of the actors. It takes scientific evaluation, which were made by UNSCARE, by BEAR, etc., and it provides recommendations, which are then transformed into international safety standard and then implemented into national regulations. So it's really one of the actors. And today, I will really talk many times about ICRP because I am ICRP member and because everything that I will try to discuss today with you comes from ICRP recommendation. However, I am a member of ASNR and ICRP, but none of them have approved or endorsed this presentation just because they haven't seen it before. And so it reflects my personal opinion. So if you agree, we will remove the logo from ICRP and ICNR. I propose a new one, the new logo for the rest of the presentation. Okay, now let's start speaking about science. I hope you got the coffee, because how can we calculate a radiological risk? The question seems to be easy to answer. In fact, it is not easy at all. In fact, I am even not sure that I will give you any answer, because how can you calculate something which is invisible? A risk is completely invisible. So what do we do? First, I would propose before to go deeper in the subject, to again share the definition, the formal definition of the risk. The risk, as you know, is something which is a combination of a probability of an event occurring and the consequence of that event. So the risk is here the probability multiplied by the severity. If I go to the top, in the top of the Eiffel Tower, and if I decide to jump, of course, the consequence of the jump will be dramatic. I maybe die. But in fact, there is absolutely no chance for me to jump. I mean, I will never do that. So at the end, the risk for me to go to the Eiffel Tower is close to zero. So this is really important to have in mind that it is the probability multiplied by the severity. However, in the common use, we may have different definitions. The word risk actually can be used in various ways. When the hazard is fixed, the risk can just represent the probability. For example, the risk of dying from a cancer can be 10 to minus 4, 10 to minus 3, 10 to whatever. The risk of dying of cancer because you have fixed the probability. Or it can even express the consequence of exposure to a stressor. For example, the risk of swimming with a shark. And by the way, the risk of swimming with a shark can be different from what you think. You can just scare the shark. So how do we calculate the risk? This is a key question. This is the title of my presentation. How do you calculate the risk? In fact, there are many different methods which depend on the available data, the objective. You have first the basic qualitative methods. In this method, you just define the probability as low probability, medium probability, or high probability. You do the same for the severity. You just combine all together, and you have, for low severity and low probability, very low risk, and so on. So it's really easy to implement and easy to use. You can have also semi-quantitative methods, the same thing, but you rate the probability and you rate the severity. For the rare probability, you will give the number, assign the number 1. For the certain probability, you will assign the number of 5, and then you multiply the number, and you've got something from 1 to 25, and you can 25, sorry, and you can give different colors just to be sure on where you are. So again, easy to do, easy to implement, but of course, this is not really precise. What we want is something which is more precise, and usually we use quantitative methods, which are called QRA, and this quantitative method, we take into account everything. We take into account different parameters, and this is what we need when you really want to quantify a risk, either to an individual or a group, and based on the exposure and the severity of the consequence. The QRA are needed when you want to speak about the acceptability of the risk. We will talk about that later on. The risk acceptability is something which is very important, and you need to have this approach to, if you want to, because you need to have a number. And of course, because there are complicated methods, but they are used in many industries, in particular in aerospace, in chemicals, oil industry, and so on. And so what do we do in our field, in radiation protection? In our field, things are even more complicated than that. And why they are complicated? Because we may have different effects after being exposed to radiation. Risk, here it is risk expressed as a consequence. Risk after exposure to ionizing radiation is, or can be, to develop deterministic effect. What we call deterministic effect means that for sure you will get the effect. So for sure, what kind of this deterministic effect are? There are tissue reaction that occur above a threshold dose. That means that if you are exposed to low dose, you will not get any deterministic effect. They appear only at high dose. And this effect increase in severity with the dose. It's exactly like a sunburn. If you go to the beach, maybe not today, but if you go to the beach, you're exposed to sun, you will get a sunburn after a few minutes of being exposed. If you are exposed for 10 minutes, you will have a slight sunburn. If you are exposed for 1 hour, you will get the severity will be very high. So sunburn is typically a deterministic effect. And in fact, after being exposed to radiation, you have the same kind of effect. As an example, we have cataract, we have burn, we have sterilities, cardiovascular disease, teratogenic effect, etc. All these effects are tissue reaction which appear after a threshold. And this is really important. Usually they are observed at high dose. When I'm talking about high dose, I'm talking about those higher than 0.5 gray. I'm sorry, I use the international system. In your language is 50 rads. And because it is high dose, they usually appear after accidental exposure. So this is one kind of consequence. But if you are lucky enough, you can have also other consequence, which is to develop a cancer of heritable effect. And they are called stochastic effects. Stochastic effect because they appear, I would say, by chance. The mechanisms are complicated to explain, but they do not appear systematically. They appear depending on many parameters. And this is why we are talking about stochastic effect. In fact, here in my diagram, you've got a relation which expresses the probability of stochastic effect according to the dose. And you can see that we have a line which correspond to the Hiroshima-Nagasaki data. And this is where, in fact, we have observed an increase of the number of cancer according to the dose. And you can see from my diagram that the line start at about 100 millisieverts. Some people say 50 millisieverts, so I don't care. But let's say it starts after a dose. We have no idea of what happened at the low dose. But for practical reason, I will come back on that later on, for practical reason, we decide to develop what we call the LNT hypothesis, the linear non-threshold hypothesis, which tell us that the risk starts from the zero. That means that there is no dose where you have no risk. This is fundamental in radiation protection. The LNT will drive everything in the system. So this is one hypothesis. And the second point is that I told you that stochastic effects include a heritable effect. In fact, they have never been demonstrated in humans. They have been demonstrated in animals. But just to be prudent, we include this component of the heritable effect. So if I try to summarize what we know in terms of effect after being exposed to radiation, we know that we have several types of effects after exposure. We have deterministic effect, whose severity increases with the dose beyond a threshold. We have stochastic effect, for which the probability of appearance increases with the dose after a dose of about 50 to 100 millisievert. We have no clear indication of what happened below 100 millisievert, but we decide by hypothesis that the risk still exists. We have no clear indication for heritable effect, and we have the severity of the consequence of the stochastic effect, which may vary. What I am saying here is that when you have a cancer, the consequence of the cancer will depend on the age of your age. If you got a cancer at 20 years old, it's not the same thing that if you get a cancer at 90 years old. Because if the risk to die at 25, I mean, the loss will be more important. So we need to take into account this severity, this different type of cancer. And also, there are some cancers that you can be cured and some cancers that cannot be cured. So this needs to be taken into account in the system. So how do you do that? It's too complex. It's too complex to include every information in one system. When you want to calculate the risk, you want to have something which is easy to use. Otherwise, nobody will do that. So what was decided is to simplify the system and to provide an easy-to-use system. And this is why, and this is where ICRP and many other bodies took many key decisions. So the only part of the presentation where you need to listen is now, because it's going to be tough. So they have taken 5 key decisions. The first decision is to say, well, you want to calculate a risk, you won't calculate a risk. Forget it. The best way is to not calculate the risk. The best way is to calculate the exposure and to express the exposure as a dose. We will see which kind of dose. And to compare the dose to a risk-based limit, which could be 20 millisievert, which can be whatever. And so what you have to do is just to play with the dose and to define a limit, which could be everywhere. This is the second point of my tweet. You will decide where to put the limit. And so you just compare the dose to the limit. So this is the first decision. So from doing that, you definitely shift from the idea of calculating a risk to the idea of measuring the dose, which is easier to calculate the risk. So this is the really first decision, which is really important. Second point is that, wait a minute. We know that when you are exposed to radiation, the risk is to develop deterministic effect. We don't want deterministic effect. We don't like deterministic effect. So what you will do is to set up a dose limit which will be below the threshold for appearance of deterministic effect. This is really important. So which will be below 500 milligram, which is the threshold which is known for the first deterministic effect. This is the second point. The third point, which is maybe the most complicated point, is that I told you that for the stochastic effect, we have cancer, we have hereditary effect, we have the problem of severity of the cancer. I told you that it's not the same thing if you got a cancer at 20 or at 80 years old. You have the quality of life. When you get a cancer, you are sick, you cannot go to work, so that really decreases your quality of life, and so on. And you have to take into account the number of years of life lost. So what the ICRP wanted and what the radio protection people wanted is just to aggregate everything in one concept, just only one data, which is called the detriment. So in radiological protection, we do not speak about the risk of having a cancer. We speak about the risk of developing a detriment. And the detriment is the combination of everything which is there, the combination of the incidence of cancer with the lethality of the cancer. I told you that you can die from some cancer, and some cancer can be cured. The quality of life is included in the detriment, and the number of years of life lost. So detriment is something which is completely artificial, which takes into account everything, just to represent the detriment, represent the harm of being exposed to radiation. And so this is, again, important. The fourth point is to set exposure limit to detriment as acceptable level. So I could speak for hours about the acceptable levels because the idea is good, but how do you define what is acceptable? I mean, if you ask to a regulatory body to define what is acceptable, they will define the value. But what is acceptable for you? Is it acceptable for you? I mean, if you are the one who is exposed, I mean, I ask a regulatory body, I say, well, what is acceptable is 20 millisievert, but will you agree with that? And this is a real problem. So we have usually value which are used in chemical industry, in radiological protection, which are 10 to -4, 10 to -6, and so on. So we can discuss for many, many hours about that, but this is important. It's just because, again, because of the LNT, because we say that, the postulate that there is no dose for which you have no risk, so we will try to define a dose for which is acceptable for the society. This is again, important. And then the fifth and last principle is just to apply ALARA. Because there is no dose for which you have no risk, you will be asked to reduce the dose as reasonably achievable. Not technically achievable, reasonably achievable. This is important because many people do not really understand or forget the word reasonably. And we can come back on that later on if you want. So the fifth principle. So if I try to summarize the risk, this is my diagram with my two types of effects, stochastic effect, deterministic effect. If I try to summarize, we don't want deterministic effect. So that means that dose limit will be on the left. We don't want the detriment, which will be unacceptable. So again, we will define a dose limit, which will be called tolerable exposure. And we will be asked to apply the ALARA. And then, if we apply ALARA, we arrive at a kind of optimized exposure, which will be the exposure. And as you know, for the ICRP recommendation, this dose limit is 20 millisievert a year. We can discuss about how they were obtained. It's a long story, funny story, but this is the system. So this is how the risk is addressed in radiological protection. So the good question is, okay, you are a nice guy. You are telling us to forget the risk and to measure the dose and to calculate the dose, but how do you do that? We have a magic tool. This magic tool is called the effective dose. Effective dose is because it is effective. So this is the formula of the effective dose. Don't worry, I won't go into the formula of the effective dose, but you should know that the effective dose does exactly what you want. It does not calculate the risk, individual risk, but it plots an individual exposure level against a limit, and it will allow optimization process. So definitely here we have a shift from the risk calculation, at least for individual exposure, to the dose calculation, and this is really important. So I was talking in my title of internal dosimetry. You know, internal dosimetry is that science which try to calculate the dose after ingestion or after inhalation of some radionuclides. So internal dosimetry is nice science, and And we use the effective dose, but we use a specific effective dose, which will be the committed effective dose. And why do we use the committed effective dose? It's just because if you inhale something, or if you ingest something, it will stay for a very long time in your body. By comparison, if you cross a beam, you are exposed for 1 second, 2 seconds, and that's finished at the end. After internal exposure, you are lucky because you inhale a nanogram, nano whatever of plutonium americium, and it can stay forever. So because it can stay for a very long time, we need to know that. We need to calculate the integral of disintegration, and this is why we calculate the committed effective dose with a commitment period, which is taken to be 50 years for the adult and to age 70 years for the children. So how do we calculate effective dose after internal contamination? It's a long story. You need to know the intake, how many becquerels you have inhaled, how many becquerels you have ingested. Once you know that, you need to know exactly where they do go, in which organs they go, which organs they will irradiate. Then you need to know, once they are in the organ, the number of nuclear disintegration over time until 70 years. Then, using nuclear data, you will calculate the emitted energy in every organ. You will then use phantom. So what a phantom? Phantom are a representation of your body. We need to know that because the phantom gives you the mass of the different organ, gives you the location of the different organ. So we need to know that because the energy, the dose is the energy divided by the mass. So you need to know the mass of the organ. And you need also to know that because to calculate the irradiation from an organ, which could be a source, to an organ, which could be a target. Because when you inhale radionuclides, they disintegrate in the body, and the radiation will irradiate the organ where they are, but also the neighboring organ. So you really need to know that. So this is why we develop phantom that allow you to calculate the absorbed dose. We wait for waiting factor for radiation. I have not enough time to discuss. We then wait again for the waiting factor for the tissue, and then we get the effective dose. So it can take months to do that. And to my knowledge, there are only few people. Some of them are here, but there are only few people who are able to do that from scratch. So to help people, and we need to do that for every element, because every element has a different biokinetics. For every physical chemical form, if you inhale something which is soluble, it will behave differently than if not soluble. For each particle size, the particle size will define the deposition in the lung. For each age group, the newborn has different metabolism, has different biokinetics than the adult. So we need to do that. And again, it can be a nightmare for many people. So because ICRP is a very nice organization, ICRP decided to help you and to provide what we call dose coefficients. So the dose coefficients are, again, magic number, which allow you to calculate directly the committed effective dose from the knowledge of the intake. Of course, the dose coefficient will take into account everything which is in the right of my diagram, but just by using one number, which is B, the committed effective dose coefficient. And just believe me, if you go to the ICRP publication, you will find this kind of table. In this table, we do have the dose coefficient according to the isotope, according to the chemical form. This is here for plutonium, depending if it is inhaled or if it is ingested, and so on. And easy to use. To calculate the dose, just need to know the intake. How many becquerel were inhaled by the guy, multiply by the dose coefficient, and you get the dose. It may happen that you do not know the intake. During regular monitoring, you may have some guy who give urine sample where you discover radioactivity in the urine sample. Nobody knew that he was contaminated. So what do you do with that? Again, thanks to ICRP, we provide bioassay function which allow you to calculate the committed dose, the committed effective dose, just by knowing the activity in the bioassay. So once you know that, you see that we have every tool we need to assess the dose. The question is, if I come back to my first question, is, okay, Guy, you are telling me that forget the calculation of the risk and try to calculate the effective dose. But the right question is effective dose the good proxy for the risk? If you ask this to many people, the first answer will be yes, definitely yes. And why it could be yes? In fact, it could be yes because the tool that we use to develop, to calculate effective dose, the new model, which were just published, they are more realistic and accurate than before. Why I'm saying that? I'm saying that because this model, they use the best available scientific data from the international literature. We use the individual publication. We also use many reports. Here we have an NSCARE report and the BEAR report from the National Academy of Science. We also use the United States Transuranium and Uranium Registry report, of course, because they contain human data, which are important for us. We are not developing model for animals. We are developing model for humans. So this is why it is so important for us. We have now in the model an incredible level of details in human anatomy and physiology. This was published in ICRP publication 89, where we give the mass and the physiology of everything you need. You need the mass of the whatever, the kidney, whatever, depending on the age. You can get it from this ICRP publication. With this data, we are able to produce physiology, what we call physiologically realistic biokinetic model. What is a biokinetic model? Biokinetic model is something made of boxes and arrows. The boxes represent the compartment, the organ where the radionuclide goes, and the arrow represents the transfer from one compartment to another compartment. So ICRP built biokinetic model for every element. Here we got a generic model for the human alimentary tract. We have a model for the respiratory tract. Yesterday we were talking about Bill Baer. Bill Baer was the chairman of that group who produced this respiratory tract model, which is actually amazing. It has been updated in the last ICRP publication, but this model is really amazing. And we have also systemic model, which describes the behavior of the element after the translocation from the stomach or the intestine to the blood or from the lung to the blood. So we also discover and we also describe the behavior of every element. And let's have just for fun a small zoom on the human respiratory tract model, because really it's really a very nice model. So you know, the human respiratory tract model, it describes everything you need to know. It describes the deposition of the particle in the lung. It describes the transport of the particle in the lung. Some particle may stay in the lung forever. Some particle may go back to the extrathoracic part by mucociliary clearance. It describes also the absorption from the lung to the blood. And again, the absorption will depend on the chemical form. The soluble form will be absorbed more than the insoluble form. So this is described according to chemical form of particle, according to the particle size. We will see some example. According to the age, the gender, the male behave differently from the female. According to the ethnic group, we have different lung size, different breathing rate, ventilation rate according to the ethnic group. This is described in the human respiratory tract model. And we also describe the modifying factor. If you smoke, if you are diseased, if you are ill, etc., everything is described there. So it's really amazing model. And just would like to show you one example of why some parameters are so important. This diagram shows you the deposition in the different parts of the human respiratory tract according to the size. So you can't see anything from this diagram, but just believe me. This shows you that if you are dealing with particles of 5 micrometers, most of the particles will deposit in the extrathoracic compartment because they are large. A small part of the particle will deposit in the alveolar region. That's okay. Nothing to say about that. If you play with 10 nanometer particle, they will deposit mainly in the deep lung. That will change the dose. And if you are playing with 1 nanometer particle, such as, for example, for the radon progeny. The radon progeny, the unattached radon progeny, is made of particles which are about 1 nanometers. Here, this diagram tells you that they will deposit mainly in the bronchial and bronchial, in the bronchi and bronchial. And what it is so important? It is important because the masses of this part is 1,000 times lower than the mass of the alveoli. What does that mean? You know, again, the dose is the energy divided by the mass. So if one particle deposits in something, in some organ which is 1,000 times smaller than the other, the dose will change by a factor 1,000. So you can see how fast it changes just by, if you make a mistake in your assessment in terms of particle size, if you take 2 micrometers instead of 1 micrometer, that changes everything. So you see the level of details which is given here. It's really amazing. And it is absolutely important because that changes everything. And why we do have new radon dose coefficients which are so high is just because of this unattached fraction of 1 nanometer. They deposit in this part, and that's really increased the dose at the end. So coming back to why my effective dose is good proxy for risk, because we have many data on the human anatomy and physiology, we are able to produce many good numerical representation of human anatomy. Again, let me have a zoom on the phantom, because it's a nice story. Most of the phantom actually were developed in the United States. Now the new generation of phantom are developed in Korea. It's really nice. So probably everybody of you knows this form of phantom. The mathematical phantom. In this mathematical, they look nice, huh? They look very close to us with these red eyes, very nice. So we have the male and female. They are called Adam and Eva. Don't ask me why. But in this phantom, we have the shape of the organ was described by mathematical function. So they are close to the human, but we may improve a little bit the system if you agree. So when in the 2010, I would say, the people decide to use CT scan coming from real anatomy, real individuals, and to transform this CT scan into to produce voxel phantom. So this voxel phantom were obtained using CT scan, or in fact it was cadaver, but just to better represent the human anatomy. Then, thanks to the progress we made in numerical data, numerical use of data, in 2020, we have produced hybrid phantom, and now we have the new generation, which is called the mesh phantom, which is a new way of developing phantom, which really represent with an incredible level of detail the human anatomy. So if you do not believe me, just look to the stomach and the small intestine. On the left, you have the former phantom. So this is supposed to be a stomach and the intestine. It looks like a sink. Actually, it has the same function. You can fill it and empty it. But anyway, this is nice, but it hardly represents the reality to me. On the right, you have the new phantom, which looks more like a human alimentary tract, if you agree. And again, this will be important when you will have to calculate the dose coming from the stomach to the ileum or jejunum or the small intestine. This is absolutely important. So in this new phantom, so we will really have a great level of details. In this phantom, we do now represent the target organ, the target layer of cells. We do not calculate the dose to the whole organ. We do calculate the dose to the cell at risk, the cell which may develop a cancer if they are irradiated. The rest for us is a wasted dose. We don't care about the dose which goes to a tissue that will not develop a cancer. The dose which goes to the fat, we don't care at all. We just calculate the dose which goes to the cell at risk. And so the cells at risk are here represented in this model. So this is in the oral cavity. The same thing for the small intestine. So we have very high resolution, which really enable us to the localization of the sensitive cells. The same for the lung. You have in the upper part, the extrathoracic part, where we define the target region. We have the airway model of the lung. I'm going very fast because just, for example, just to show you the accuracy of this model. The heart, we are not supposed to have a cancer from the heart. So, but we need to know the dose to the heart for many different reasons. We need to know the dose to the blood. The blood, we have blood everywhere in the body. And the blood is a source organ. We have, when you are contaminated, you may have radionuclides everywhere in the blood. So we need to know that precisely to calculate the dose. Same thing for the lymph node, skeleton, and I was talking about adult. We do that the same for the infant and for the children. And the children, you should need to know that children is not a small adult. Children is more complicated than that. Specifically concerning, for example, the depth of the target region, it can be different from the adult to the children. So this is included in the new phantom. We do that for many organs, so this is a difference. And so at the end, we have a whole family. We even have dogs, but this is another story. We have the whole family with the adult here are missing, with the male, female at different age, which allow you to calculate the dose at different age. And so you can see that our phantom are very active. Look at that. I like that very much. So, sorry, it was just to have fun a little bit. Okay, so what we are doing now is that we are working on the embryo and fetus because we calculate the dose also to the embryo and fetus. If you have embryo, you have pregnant woman. So we also calculate with we have different phantom for the pregnant woman. And they are so precise that we take into consideration the change of the posture according to the pregnancy stage. So they are taken. And once you have newborn, we also develop phantom for breastfeeding phantom because we also calculate the dose to the breastfeeding infant. So you see that we have at the end a large bibliothèque of phantom which allow us to calculate dose in different situations. ICRP also developed or revised the nuclear data for more than 1,000 radionuclides. Every radionuclide has its own characteristic in terms of disintegration. They emit alpha radiation, beta, gamma, neutron, whatever. We need to know the energy for every of these radionuclides. This was revised and published by ICRP. We also put into the model a very precise localization of the target cell for cancer induction. And let me show you one example of why it is so important to know precisely the localization of the target cell for the cancer induction. Let's take an example. This is an example coming for the airway in the human respiratory tract model. So here in the center, you have the air. This is where the deposit, the radionuclide deposit. And this is another way to represent the system. You have different cells, different category of cells. And here in the bronchial wall, we have two categories of cells which may develop a cancer if they are irradiated. There are the secretory cells and there are the basal cells, which are located at different depths. You know, this is the lumen. On the top, this is the lumen where the air comes, and different depths. So now try to imagine that this guy will be contaminated by the radon gas. Radon gas will disintegrate, will produce one progeny, which is polonium-214. Polonium-214 has an energy of 7.7 MeV. And so if the particle deposits on the gel, in the mucus, after disintegration, it will produce alpha particle with a range of about 70 micrometers. So with this range, every particle will irradiate both the secretory cells and the basal cells. So when you want to calculate the dose, you have to take that into consideration. The problem is that polonium-214 is one of the progeny. We have another progeny in the radon, which is polonium-218 with a lower energy of 6 MeV. And here, because of this lower energy, the range will be lower, and so the range of the alpha particle. This is a really schematic view, of course, but just to explain the range of this particle, which makes that they will irradiate the secretory cell, they will not irradiate the basal cell. So you see the level of details we need to know, we need to include in the model just to calculate as much as possible, as precise as possible, the dose to the different part of the different organ. So at the end, you have no dose. And we have the same example for the human alimentary tract, where here it's not the human, it's the alimentary tract from guinea pigs, but we have the same thing. Here you've got, this is an autoradiography with plutonium in small intestine of guinea pigs. This star in dark represents the plutonium and the disintegration of the plutonium. So you can see many disintegration, and the first reaction, if you see to this picture, wow, the dose should be very high. Actually, the dose is close to 0. You know why? Because the sensitive cells are there in the crypt. They are hidden in the crypt, and they are too far to be hit by the alpha disintegration. So according to the model, here we have plenty of plutonium, no dose to the alimentary to the small intestine. And again, this is just to show you some example where we need to know these details. Another thing which is nice to know is the SAFs. SAFs are the specific absorbed fraction which are calculated. So I'm sorry, but if you want to have a coffee, this is maybe now, because now we are talking about mathematics. No, I'm kidding. I will not talk about mathematics. Just would like to show you with very easy example. The SAF tell you which organ will be exposed when one organ is exposed. So you have one source organ, one target organ. And here, just to easy example, if you are dealing with weakly penetrating radiation, such as the beta emitters, for example, alpha emitters, if you have radionuclide in the lung, the alpha emission will stay in the lung because of the range of the particle. If you are dealing with highly penetrating radiation, such as the gamma radiation, for example, they will go long, they will have a longer range, and so they will irradiate the other tissue. And so this is what we absolutely need to know. We need to know the SAF, SAF, for every couple of source targets, for every radionuclides, for every age, every gender, everything, and so on. So at the end, we have produced more than 3 million of data points, which were QA'd, of course. So you can imagine it took us many years to do that. But so you see again the level of details we need to calculate, just to calculate the dose. In our model also, we have included the decay product. This is a question I have very often. When we use a dose coefficient, does that include the decay product? Does that include every progeny which is formed in the body, which will disintegrate also in the body? Yes, the dose coefficient includes every progeny. This is a scheme for the radon. You can see the radon disintegrate in polonium-218, in lead, in bismuth, in polonium again 214. Everything is included. Every disintegration is included. And more than that, the specific biokinetic is included. I mean, when you inhale radon, we have a biokinetic model for the radon. But once the radon is transformed into polonium, the polonium has a different behavior. So we have to build another model for the polonium from where it was born. If the polonium is formed in the intestine, we need to have a biokinetic model for the polonium from the intestine. So you imagine the work, I think. But again, this is included the model. So at the end, we were able to produce those coefficients for a large number of radionuclides for different chemical form, for different particle size from 1 nanometers to 20 micrometers. And at the end, we end up with age-dependent dose coefficients for adult children, nursing infant, pregnant women, and so on. So it took us 20 years of modeling, calculation, QA to produce several million of data. So because of that, we can say yes, definitely, effective dose can be a good proxy for risk because of the accuracy of the model, the wide range of exposure scenario considered. It's easy to use, it's easy to use. So the effective dose is definitely the dose, the tool of choice for calculating exposure and comparing it to a reference value or a dose limit. So this is my intermediate conclusion number 1. So therefore, it is definitely suited for risk prevention, which is also risk management. So we can validate this from the risk calculation to the dose measurement. I say we can validate this. The question is, can we do the reverse? Can we go from the dose measurement or dose calculation to the risk assessment? Can we do that? Do you have any idea if we can do that? Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we can do that because effective dose is calculated using many models. And like you know that every models are wrong by definition. Some of them are useful, some people say. So the models are wrong. So like every model, they are based on many assumptions, approximation, and simplification. So I just would like to show you some of this assumption. So one assumption, which is not the least, is the linear non-threshold dose-response relationship. Again, if you remember, we are expressed the probability of detriment, not the effect, probability of detriment according to the dose. We do have this Hiroshima-Nagasaki data above 100 millisievert for sure. We do not know what happened in the range of low dose below 100 millisievert. But what we decide to do is to extrapolate this curve, this line, until to 0. And by convention, we decide that the relation which expresses the probability of detriment according to the dose has a relationship which corresponds to a linear non-threshold dose relationship. This is done by convention. It is definitely controversial. I'm sure we will discuss on that during the question. But again, it represents a prudent approach because we have no idea what happened below this dose to protecting people. We can discuss about that later on. The second point, the second assumption is that we assume that you can add the dose you receive in your life. You can add first the dose. If you receive a dose to the shoulder, you can add the dose to the feet. We can, if you receive a dose from alpha disintegration, we consider that you can add the dose coming from gamma disintegration. And if you receive a dose in the beginning of the year, we consider that you can add the dose you have received at the end of the year. This is by hypothesis. We have no idea if it is true or if it is not true. I have no idea if it is true. It may happen that it is more complicated than just additivity of dose. It may happen that something changes when you are exposed to radiation. You can be more sensitive, less sensitive. Well, life is life. But the truth is that we do that. We do add the different dose. We manage exposure by adding the dose, but we do not really know if this corresponds to the reality. The third assumption is important also to me. Nobody talks about that, but to me it is really important, is that when we calculated the radiation risk by relationship between the dose and the detriment, we have calculated this relationship assuming that the effects were due only to ionizing radiation, which can make sense at the level of dose which were received by the people in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, because the level of dose was high. But when you want to extrapolate to low dose, you extrapolate to people who are exposed to many environmental stressors. You are exposed to chemicals, you are exposed to virus, you are exposed to air pollutants, and we have absolutely no idea of the interaction between ionizing radiation and those pollutants. We have no idea at all. But the extrapolation makes the assumption that there is no interaction at all. At least it is probably wrong. This is where we are working. In France, we are trying to work on that just to see if the interaction between pollutants change the relationship that we know. So this is really a very nice assumption. We also, when you calculate those, you need to simplify the system, and you need to make some judgment and to take some decision. You remember I told you that we calculate the dose to reference male and female, which are represented by this very nice phantom. They are very nice, but actually we calculate the dose to the phantom. We do not calculate the dose to the people. We calculate the dose to a phantom which have been exposed in the same conditions as the people. This is completely different. I don't know which phantom you would like to choose, but again, they look like us, but they are not us. So again, we calculate the dose to the phantom. And at the end, also, maybe the best thing is that anyway, when we provide those coefficients, when we calculate the dose, we just average the dose between male and female. And why do we do that? It's just because in the calculation of the effective dose, we have weighting factor for tissue. This weighting factor for the tissue represents the sensitivity of the tissue according to for the cancer induction. And they are provided by the epidemiological studies. And epidemiological studies, we do not have enough people, so we do not have enough statistical power to distinguish weighting factor for male, female, and we do not have specific weighting factor for infant, for nursing infant, and so on. So we have just one set of weighting factor, tissue weighting factor, and that obliges us to average everything. So at the end, again, when you calculate the effective dose, you calculate the effective dose to a phantom, which could be male or female, but anyway, you will apply a weighting factor for tissue, which will be an average between male and female, and which will be an average over population across the world. So you can see the simplification of the system. So my intermediate conclusion number 2 will be, okay, effective dose is quantity related to the risk, definitely. But it is based on numerous assumptions, simplifications. So because of that, it does not allow for precise calculation of the risk to expose individuals. So if I go back to my diagram, if you want to go from the dose measurement to the risk assessment by inference, I would say, be cautious. And this is what UNSCARE say. Do not do that. This is what ICRP say. Do not do that. Do not try to assess individual risk just from the knowledge of the dose. You can do the reverse, but you cannot do that. And so what ICRP recommends, what ICRP said, is that it's just an approximate indicator of possible risk. They have spent months just to write this sentence, to choose the right word. So this is just approximate indicator of possible risk. You should do that. You can assess the risk just in first intention before to perform more accurate calculation. And if you really want to assess the risk of individuals, you need to use the best scientific data. You need to use a specific organ absorb dose. You need to use a specific relative biological effectiveness. You need to know the age, the sex, the population-specific risk estimate, and you also need to know the medical history of the people, because that change everything. So this is data that you need to know if you really want to assess individual dose. So what we are planning to do for the future, just to improve the system. So what we want to improve, here again, this is the formula of the effective dose. we have two components, one physical component, which is the energy divided by the mass. For that, we have the phantom. We really did many progress, and we are almost ready to calculate the individual absorbed dose, so the really physical quantity, because we have many phantom. We have a bibliothèque of hundreds of phantom, so you can find the phantom which looks like you are. So that will be easy to do. We even have phantom in different positions, which are important after external irradiation. So that can be used. The problem is, in this formula, you have also a component which is based on the risk, which use the weighting factor, which is really based on the sensitivity of the different tissue according to the cancer induction. And this is where we have much to do. And because the data come from the epidemiological studies, and as you know, epidemiological studies, the limitation is the statistical power of the data and the cohort you are working with. So this is really a challenge for the future, and ICRP is working on that. So as a take-home message, ICRP has developed a tool as a proxy for radiological risk. Thanks to the accuracy of the model, I think we can say that effective dose is perfectly suited for calculating exposure, and therefore for preventing the risk and for limiting the risk. Since effective dose is linked to the risk, there is a natural temptation to infer the risk from the dose measurement. Somebody do that, but in fact, actually, we cannot do that. And really, ICRP consider that you should use something else. You should use specific data. ICRP is currently working on the subject, and they have just set up a task group dealing with individualization and stratification in radiation protection. And so my final conclusion will be, if they try to answer to the question, can we really calculate the risk? I'm not sure. I'm not sure we can really calculate the radiological risk, because at least to individual risk, because of the uncertainty in the model. However, we can perfectly manage the risk. And this is important. We do not necessarily need to calculate the risk as long as we are able to manage it. And when I'm talking about management, I'm talking about reducing the risk and protecting people. This is the only thing we need. And this is the need. And in fact, actually, this approach is really the strength of the radiation protection system, which has, I think we can say that it has proven its effectiveness over several decades. And you know what? I think I'm finished. So thank you for staying with me. Thank you.
Thank you, François. So now we have time for questions. Yeah, I'm sure there will be questions. Okay, Luis, please, sure.
Yeah? Okay. Great presentation. So I have one question and one observation. So the question, when I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we produced the ICRP 88 for those mother-infant, and I saw now that you have the phantom and holding the baby. So are you now considering the external exposure that the baby is getting from the? Oh, great.
Yeah.
So this is the question.
Yeah,
so
and we are working on that. In fact, actually, we just started the work trying to calculate the dose to the embryo and fetus,
yes,
which is one of the most complicated because, again, the embryo, the position of the embryo change during the pregnancy. So we are working on that. Hopefully, we will produce the report in, let's say, 2 years from now. And then just after, we will start the revision of the 88. With the dose given by breastfeeding to the infant. So yes, irradiation from the mother. Well, yes, we have the two components. We have the irradiation from the mother, yes, to the breast, and we have also contamination by the milk, yes, by ingestion of the milk. So this will be included. Yeah.
And the observation is very nicely put. So I remember one discussion that occurred in a meeting that you organized in Montpellier, 2006. And a lot of people in the room, they're saying they're calculating the dose to someone. You're not calculating the dose to someone. You're calculating the dose to a reference person. And the effective dose is a tool that allows you to compare that working place against the other working place. And then we put a scenario, okay, people work with iodine, but everybody there, they have no thyroid. So how are we going to calculate the dose for that? It doesn't matter because we're calculating for that specific age group. As a manager, I want you to compare that kind of exposure and the other kind of exposure, adding beautifully the way you put. So under controlling risk situation, that's what it means. So that's the point you have there. And people are difficult to understand. So say, I want to know my dose. Well, as you know, I worked for 19 years in Los Alamos, so I have to deliver reports to persons, and I have to explain to the person, this is not your dose. Okay, even after many follow-ups that we took from the person, I could fit the model to that person, calculate the intake for that person. Okay, until the intake, I can tell more or less is yours. But when you put a phantom into that, it's not your dose. It's the dose that we calculate here. At this, you did so nice. I really enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much. When the latest phantom that you have there, is Kim using the Asian data or Caucasian? What are the...
No, they are provided by our Korean colleague, but they are based on the reference male and reference female dosification data from ICRP. They fit completely the reference male, female.
So just an evolution from the previous standard. Thanks. I promise to be quiet. I hope I can.
Hi, this is Joey. Yeah, this is great. I mean, for me, it's like a review. I mean, it's very good. But this is actually new to me. I mean, I like it. It's a postulate indicator of possible risk. So my question is twofold. Can you somehow quantify approximate and possible? I know it's hard. I mean, if not, what's the point to improve dosimetry? I mean, all this thing you talk about, you can worry about pregnant, about different fountain age. So yeah, ceiling is there. Yeah. What's the point to do all this?
I understand the point, and to some extent you are right. We are putting many effort many years of work to provide a quantity which can be used only with many restrictions. But again, the effective dose was initially built for the management of exposure. It was not built for the risk assessment. It is used by many people for risk assessment because we have no better tools. Because it is easy to use. You just press a button and you get the answer. But again, because of all this limitation, the effective dose can be used only for risk management. So why they are talking about possible risk? Because of the LNT, nobody can tell. Well, there are some people who knows, but I do not know. As a scientist, I have more questions than answers. So I have no idea what happened, and I certainly have no idea of what happened below 50 millisieverts. So this is why we are talking about possible risk. But again, effective dose has not been built to calculate the risk. It has been built to manage the exposure, which is the most important in radiological protection. What we want to do in radiological protection is to protect people. So it makes the job.
Thank you. My name is Dan Strom. I'm with USTUR. Clearly, women are at higher risk from a given radiation exposure than men. And it's, okay. Is this on? Yeah, okay. Anyway, the tissue weighting factor for the female breast should be 0.24, and for the male breast it should be 0. The tissue weighting factor for the female thyroid should be at least double whatever the male is. And this is well established by, these risks are well established. So I, as a scientist, really object when ICRP takes all of these wonderful intermediate calculations and turns them into an average over both sexes, because that censors so much information. I understand perhaps why ICRP did that. I can tell you in the United States that there are two things about a workplace. You can have equal access to the workplace, regardless of whether you're male, female, or irrelevant. You cannot have equal risk in the workplace, because the first one trumps that in the US. In US law, it's equal access to the workplace. But still, as a scientist and as somebody who wants to understand this, seeing all this wonderful work get collapsed into an average with very limited meaning just drives me nuts. Would it be possible for ICRP to publish those intermediate results before they average over both sexes?
This is what they are, well, they are thinking about it. But two answers. The first one is, you're perfectly right. One of the reasons for which they average everything is for ethical reasons. They do not want to segregate between male and female. So this is one of the reasons it's really, really important. So again, by doing this, we know that there are difference of sensitivity between male and female. We know that we have difference of sensitivity between the age. But as long as you are conservative, and as long as you calculate those just to know where you are comparing to a limit, you are fine. We are not assessing risk. This is my first answer. The second answer to your last question, yes, ICRP is thinking about that. And what we hope, deeply hope, is that in some years, maybe I don't know how many years, we will be able to have a better estimation of the weighting factor according to the age and according to the sex. That could be really an improvement. But for now, we are unable to do that, just because of the lack of statistical power of epidemiological studies. So, you know, the Hiroshima-Nagasaki cohort was made of 86,000 people. Now we are, epidemiological people are trying to combine many different studies. So Hiroshima-Nagasaki is one thing, but we have also the in-work cohort, you know, where we have, I think it's 350,000 people. So we are just currently improving our knowledge of the risk, and this is what we are, hopefully in a few years from now, we will be able to provide sex-specific, not weighting factor, but at least coefficient that can be used to assess the risk. But again, as long as we are talking about risk prevention, I can't see the problem of having female and male together. We do that for the chemical toxicity. We do not separate between male and female for the chemicals, for the same reason.
Hi, great lecture, thank you. Maybe a dumb question, Jim Conklin. Maybe a dumb question, but will we be able, do you think we'll be able to incorporate cellular repair mechanisms into the overall model, especially at low doses?
The repair mechanism?
Yeah.
They are already included because
good.
Well, actually,
So
when you calculate the weighting factor of a tissue, what you do is just to look to the final results. And the final result includes the mutation, the repair mechanism, the elimination with the immune system. They include everything because you just deal. This is the strength of the systems. That means that we do not work on the initial events because we do not really know what happened from an initial event to the appearance of the cancer. So we prefer to focus on the final result because we do not know what happened before. And all the weighting factors, all the risk coefficient are derived from the final result, from the data, from the cancer appearance. So this cancer already includes everything which is
It's death, it's not incidence. That's
right.
the difference.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I enjoyed your presentation very much because I am not from this field. I was wondering, you spoke about effective dose and its relationship to risk prevention. What is your acceptable uncertainty for this effective dose?
You mean what is an uncertainty when we calculate the effective dose?
If you calculate it and it says 50,
we have large uncertainties. We have variability
I understand there
between
are a lot of
people,
variables.
and we have uncertainties because what I did not tell you is that when we have many reasons for which we have this uncertainty. When we use biokinetic model to calculate the deposition of the radionuclide in different organs, some of the models are built with data coming from animals. Some of the models are built with data coming from another chemical element, just by analogy, because we miss data. So we are so grateful when we have human data, such as for the pituitary rhinome and so on. But in many cases, we are dealing with all the elements from the periodic table, you know. And we should say that for some of the elements, we have no data at all. So we should guess. So at the end, the uncertainty can be high. Some people say that uncertainty in internal dosimetry can be by a factor 2 to 100%. But again, I don't see the point if you are dealing with doses which are close to microsieverts. If the dose is 1 microsievert or 2 microsieverts or 3 microsieverts, we really don't care. The problem is when you are dealing with exposure which gives you a dose which is close to the limit. In such a case, the ICRP recommendation are say, well, wait a minute, forget the model, try to focus on the guy, try to assess the risk, really, forget the prevention, assess the risk, and use different data. Here, the ICRP data are for the risk management, the risk prevention, and so we integrate that we have great uncertainties, but we are supposed, using the system, we are supposed to be well below the 20 millisievert. In reality, only few people are exposed at 20 millisievert a year. So most of the people are exposed to 20 sievert during their lifetime, not a year. So it's really few cases.
So 200%?
By factor 2.
100%. Factor of 2.
It can be a factor 2.
That's acceptable.
I don't know. It is the best we can do anyway.
Yeah. I will show you tomorrow from USR data. I have few nice plots.
Acceptability has nothing to do with it, it's just the data.
Dan Strom again. Regarding uncertainty, I served on the radionuclide cancer risk coefficient panel, along with Dr. Avtandilashvili here. And this is EPA, and the revision of Federal Guidance Report 16 really just cratered over uncertainty because we couldn't get the authors of that document to make an honest estimate of uncertainty. And when I looked into this really, really hard, along with Steve Simon and others, EPA has these categories. The best one is a factor of 2.
Yeah.
The worst one is a factor of 15. And where do you get a factor of 15? Well, when you get something that's maybe in an element for which you have no data, and it's in a column next to an element in the periodic table for which there is some data, but there are that data is completely bimodal, and the differences are a factor of 10 just in the data. And so getting a central tendency of that is just making up numbers. So Ken, your question of uncertainty, when you look at these, all of the assumptions that EPA is dealing with, which include exposure uncertainties, like how rough is the soil that's contaminated, and therefore how much self-absorption you get, those are very fanciful numbers.
Yeah.
Thank you. My question is shifting gears slightly. And I just want to say I'm very grateful for the presentation. As a non-technical professional, I found it to be very easy to follow, and I have so many questions because this is an area that I have only really been introduced to since last year when I first got connected with Sergey in the USTUR. And in my role at WSU Tri-Cities as the director of Cougar Tracks, working with non-traditional students who potentially would want to pivot into new industries, emerging professionals. What does the next generation of rad professionals, chemists, what do they need to know about this industry, about your research, to be motivated to join the charge? Because what I'm faced with in my daily work is how do we solidify the pipeline with fresh talent who can continue this work? And also, how do we, in that process, demystify a lot of the fear and the uncertainty around this topic to motivate professionals who have transferable skills that can contribute to this field and who may want to pivot industries?
This is a very good point, actually. We are facing the same problem. In the task group that I am leading, I think I may be the youngest. No, I'm kidding. We have 2 young people, but so this is really a problem because by doing this, we are doing science. So to do science, we need to have scientists, and the scientists, at least in Europe, they are educated and they are told to publish scientific paper. And for them now, specifically now, scientific paper means some very strange study with mechanistic studies and so on. And when I come to them and say, well, don't you want to come with me to work with ICRP? The first answer is, what? What is ICRP? I don't care about ICRP. And the second answer is, well, ICRP is not science, so ICRP is something weird. And finally, nobody wanted to join us. But this is a really key point. So this is why ICRP has developed some years ago a program including mentees, which is a very nice program. So you can, if you have, this is a call, if you have people around you who are young people, volunteer, who wants to really be involved for a while in task group, just to see what happened, just ask them to call and to ask to be a member. Yeah. And this works very, very well, actually. And they are doing a very great job. So I have some hope because I have seen the evolution. Some years, even 10 years ago, I was really the youngest. And now we start to have young people, and hopefully they will follow us and they will take over. Because we need to continue that, and this is the real point. It's really, really important.
Thank you.
Second question. You mentioned target cells. If the measurements were able to be done on target cells, does this reduce some of the uncertainty in your models?
Well,
because I found it very interesting. I think you young people can get interested in it as new cutting edge science and interesting contributions to the field, important contributions to the field.
Yeah.
So,
I think, well, of course we have uncertainties when we calculate the dose to the target cell, but I think this is not where we are the worst. We have pretty good information on where the target cells are, and we have, I think, pretty good model which allow us to calculate the dose which is received by the target cell, depending on where is the radionuclide. So this is, of course, this is a source of uncertainty, but this is not the place where we have the highest uncertainty. Really, the highest uncertainty comes from the LNT first, from the biokinetic model, from the knowledge of intake and so on. But you know, in some cases, when you are dealing with some people who give a urine sample, and when you find radionuclides in the urine sample, you have to know when it was contaminated. And if the follow-up is an annual follow-up, you have to guess from 1 day to 365 days. So we have many sources of uncertainty. I'm not sure that the target cell is the worst. But of course, everything that can improve the system will be good to be taken.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, François. I think that's the last question. So I have a small present for you. Okay, yes. So this is a coincidence. It's in the Chanel bag.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
Please open it. And
is it dangerous?
no, it's not.
Is it plutonium?
No, it's better. Make sure. It's a cooker cheese.
Wow!
Cheese in a can.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Parker board members, guys, let's come over here. I'll take a picture.
Everybody?
Yeah, Parker board people.
Oh, Parker.
Trustees.
Parker board,
Parker board.
trustees.
Jim, Ron.
Jim, where's Jim?
Jim Conk already
Yeah,
left.
Jim. Oh, Jim just left.
Yes.
George. You're really awesome. Good job. Yeah.
Oh, we can have Ron.
Yes. Mike.
Ron Goldberg.
Yes, please.
Oh, it's just wonderful.
Yeah,
I know you very well.
My bad. Start there. But not for this session. The cell, whatever you do, they have similar. Just use the best they can do. That's the best they can do.
Ron, turn around.